Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor and thank you very much for joining us for these live broadcasts on the Car Dealer YouTube channel. Now today I am delighted to say we've got Tom Wood on the show. He's the CEO of Car and Classic. Hello Tom.
Hi James, thanks for having us.
No, absolute pleasure to have you on. Just a bit of an intro before we get cracking. Now, Tom has been the boss of Car and Classic since August 2018, when Cazana, the vehicle data experts, bought it. Along with being the boss of Car and Classic, he's also the CEO of Cazana, so a role he's had for 9 years. A very busy man indeed. Now, Car and Classic is a brand which a lot of people are familiar with. It has become a leader in the European classic car marketplace and boasts millions of car buyers visiting its platform every month. Now, plenty to talk about in the next 20 minutes or so. This is a live show, so if you have any questions, then feel free to pop them in the comments box. But in the meantime, we'll start with mine. Now, Tom, thanks for coming on. Car and Classic is a business I'm very familiar with, and I'm sure many people watching will be familiar with it as well. Just tell us a bit more, because, I mean, like many successful brands, it was quite a different company when it started to where it is now, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I guess it's almost an accidental success. It was started as a hobby project by a lovely bloke called Tony, who we ended up buying the business. I think
Oh, is Tom still there? Which is it a slight technical difficulty we feel?
Sorry, James, you there?
Oh, he's hit. Tom, you're back. Tom, you totally disappeared there. Sorry.
I was just saying it's great.
You could have said anything during that period and I would have believed you. Sorry, we lost you just as you were starting to answer the question. So I don't know if you can just sort of backtrack a bit. That'd be great.
Yeah, sure. I was explaining it was almost a hobby project by a chap called Tony, who we ended up buying the business from, Tony Ingram. And it almost accidental success, by having the best selection of classic and specialist vehicles.
Oh, Tom, I fear we've lost you again, unfortunately. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got you, James.
Oh, you've got
the joys of Zoom. At least I'm not on mute.
Well, we keep getting to the bit where you bought the company from Tony, and then you just disappear. So
that's it. That's all that happened. Yeah. So no. Look, it was a passion project of Tony's, and the reason it's successful is because it's got the best selection of classic and specialist vehicles out there. So it's attracted a massive audience of anyone that's passionate about buying, selling, engaging with, browsing on those kind of vehicles. And so, today we have over 3 million people a month that visit the site and interact with it from all over the world, predominantly Europe, and our biggest audience is in the UK.
Yeah. So, I mean, because, the classic car marketplace is just as vibrant as it is for new and used cars in the other sectors. But what actually marks Car and Classic out from the rest of the competition, would you say?
I guess our scale is, I think, 4 times larger than the nearest competitor from a kind of traffic and audience point of view, and I think also the choice on the site, and I think it's also 4 or 5 times higher than anyone else out there in market. So it's the place to go to find stuff. People have spent many happy Sundays idly browsing that site looking for what they might put in the garage, and it's kind of famous for that. We've got a bit of everything on there.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of shudder to say this really, but it's sort of like the Auto Trader for classic cars, isn't it? It's the name that trips off the tongue when people think about classic cars, think about buying them. Yeah, that's quite a difficult position to get in. So, tell us the journey from when Cazana bought the firm, because it's been a big period of expansion, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the audience and the stock were kind of there when we bought the site, but it was a bit underinvested in. The brand, the design of the site itself, the technology that underpinned it was all a little bit fragile, and so there's been a big period of investment in terms of improving that. So whilst the site hasn't necessarily radically changed from an appearance point of view, we've spent a lot of time on the data, on the technology behind the business to be able to make sure that we can and then audience-wise, we've doubled the site since we acquired it. So that the traffic we have today is roughly 2x what it was when we bought it back in August 2008. By increasingly encouraging more vehicles on the site, it's improving the technology and the SEO, and the kind of the way that we acquire traffic into that business. And then it's launching new propositions like our auction service, which we launched mid last year.
Yeah. I'll come back to the auctions bit a little bit later on. But you say that traffic numbers have grown enormously. I mean, is it difficult to work out whether the traffic are actually the people are actually intending to buy, or they're just dreamers? Is it difficult to work that kind of ratio out?
Look, every classified site, every portal out there will have people that are browsing for stuff that don't necessarily have intent to buy at that time. And I think classic purchases, perhaps more than aspirational purchase that people spend quite a long time thinking about. That it is the place to get that level of interest to generate the level of leads from. So there is a lot of intent to buy on the market on Car and Classic, as well as the Sunday browsers, which the site is also loved for people sharing links of aspirated add to their garages or their collections.
Yeah. Now, apologies to any sort of commissioning editor or person that I work with, because I do spend a lot of my time on Car and Classic. One thing that has struck me recently, though, in the last few years, is how much easier the site is to navigate. I mean, I know you say the design is quite similar, but it's quite a clever thing that you've done. It remains familiar, but it seems to be a lot easier to interact with, to message sellers, to actually view pictures. The site's less buggy than it was. I mean, that must have been something you've worked hard on.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to be really careful with it. It's almost an institution, Car and Classic, right? Within the set of people that use it and love it. So you can't change it too much, but it has to work, and it has to work well on mobile. It has to work well from a kind of search functionality point of view, as you say. And so, we've spent a lot of time investing in the kind of the behind the scenes, if you like. So the way the site is structured, the way the data works, taxonomy. We've built an incredible taxonomy of every vehicle ever made, basically, which didn't exist before, because you need to be able to work out, what is that given vehicle that you're listing on the site. In the technology side of the business, and a lot more to come, frankly. We've got some really exciting plans for the site, but again, without breaking that core experience that so many people know and love.
Yeah. It's pretty obvious that you like to keep the two brands separate, Cazana and Car and Classic. What's the reasoning behind that? Or could you sort of divest the two a little bit and sort of share the user experience?
So they have different audiences. They do different things. Cazana's a data company. We work with predominantly businesses, lots of car dealers, including classic car dealers. So we have commonality of kind of customers between the two businesses, but it's really a business focused offering in Cazana. One of the reasons that we acquired Car and Classic, not just because I love it and not just because I love the cars on it, but it's got this amazing wealth of data over the last kind of 20 years of its history on the weird and the wonderful, as well as some mainstream vehicles on there as well. So Cazana takes huge amounts of data and uses that to come up with very, very accurate vehicle valuations. And we're kind of famous for being able to value everything. So whether it's a Jaguar XJ220 or a Ferrari F40 or a Ford Focus, we're very accurate on the lot. And so part of the reason for the acquisition was acquiring that back catalogue of all of that price history from Car and Classic. So we share some data between the businesses. We share some resource between the businesses. We think it's important. Car and Classic is a brand in its own right, and it's important to maintain that as a separate entity.
Yeah. Now, how has 2020 been for Car and Classic? Because I mean, during last year, whenever we were talking about the used car industry, I mean, various lockdowns catalyzed used car demand to record levels. I mean, did the same happen in the classic car market? I mean, what did you see last year?
So, as with most classified sites and portals, we saw traffic increase through last year. Certainly, from lockdown one onwards, really, there were more people at home browsing. I guess as a result of fall into kind of physical dealerships because they all physical peer-to-peer sales because they couldn't, they weren't allowed to go and kind of physically engage. So we saw a pretty significant rise in traffic through the year, which is frankly persisted through into this year. We also acknowledged we work with a lot of traders. Roughly 50% of the stock on Car and Classic comes from the trade, and we wanted to help them through kind of lockdown periods when there's it's harder to get people onto the forecourt to be able to carry on transacting, and that's where the auction platform actually came from in mid-year last year. We acknowledged that we needed to find a way of helping both trade sellers and private sellers transact without having a physical component to that transaction. So we came up with the auction service and the escrow service around that to be able to kind of complete a transaction online and get a vehicle gone in 7 days without necessarily having to have a physical component to that sale. And that's where that came from. So, in actual fact, 2020, whilst it was a challenging year for the market, it's been a challenging year for I guess, prices of certain sectors of classic car. The market's still pretty buoyant. There are lots of buyers out there. There are lots of sellers out there as well. The auction platform has allowed us to enable that kind of online end-to-end transaction as well as part of that.
Yeah. I mean, what are the challenges of running an online auctions model? Because when we talk to the traditional auction companies, BCA, Mannheim, etc., they've been forced into running online, purely exclusively online auctions because of coronavirus. Whereas with you, it's because that's where the business was going anyway. So, I mean, what are the challenges in setting something like that up, and what are the pitfalls, do you think?
So we wanted to replicate the physical auction experience online, and so that includes when the hammer goes down and the buyer is contracted to buy that vehicle. That included collecting the funds from the buyer and managing the physical fund transfer part of the transaction as well, which is the experience you'd get if you go to a physical auction. You have to pay for that vehicle there and then, or within a short period of time afterwards, and the auction manages that payment, that transfer piece. So that added massive challenges to the launch for us, right? Building that escrow service around the auction piece itself was a challenge. There's KYC stuff you have to do around cash transfer and so on. So it was that definitely added some significant challenges into building the platform and launching it. But we're really proud of that. That makes us the safest place to kind of transact from a classic vehicle auction point of view online, because we're managing that. The cash transfer, the sometimes quite high numbers. I think our most expensive car was £250,000 that we've sold on the platform. So you don't really want to be taking that in cash or trying to do a bank transfer, whilst you're maintaining a socially distanced vehicle handover. So that was a really important part of it, was actually getting into the cash part of the transaction and managing that through safely. And all of the other good stuff around real-time bidding, dealing with thousands of concurrent viewers and lots of people engaging with the auctions at any one point in time and making sure that's fair and we're managing that process properly. Lots of technical challenges, but it's gone from a launch in June. I think we've grown about 80% month on month since then. So it's going really well. It's clear that there's a market demand for it. Obviously at the moment during lockdown 3, but we believe beyond that. We believe this model has a place in the market to stay.
Yeah. I mean, I find this part of the business fascinating, really, because I mean, it's one thing somebody buying a used VW Golf on the internet and doing click and collection, that kind of thing, when they know roughly what they're going to be getting. But when it comes to a classic car, and as we know, no two classics are the same, whether that's condition or spec or whatever. Trust really does come into this, doesn't it? Because people they're not seeing the car themselves. they're making their decision to actually put a bid on something from high quality photos and video, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, trust comes into it massively. So we are only as good as the descriptions and the accuracy of the photos and so on that we take. So one of our policies is the person that takes the photos is a journalist that also writes up the description of the vehicle. So it's the same person that goes out there, visits the vehicle, and then writes up a description. So there's no lost in translation between a kind of a photographer that's then talking to a separate writer to kind of write up the description. And yeah, you know, up to 200 images of the vehicles from all around. That's kind of the exterior and bodywork, and then underneath the vehicle if we can get it up on a ramp and so on as well. So really thorough, transparent descriptions of the good and the bad. Right, we want to be really open, and we encourage our sellers to disclose anything that isn't photographable as part of that process to make sure that the consumers that buy these vehicles can trust us. And I guess the good news is in a relatively short period of time, we're already seeing repeat buyers come back to the service that have had a great experience buying a vehicle off the auction previously and are coming back to buy again.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is something I've been reporting on recently. As the number of online sales and listings have increased, so too have the number of fake adverts designed purely to con people out from their money. I mean, is this a real problem in the classic car market at the moment? And if it's affecting you, I mean, are you doing anything to combat it?
I can't talk about the broader classic car market, but I can talk about what we do on Car and Classic. So I think we're fairly unusual as a classified site in that we manually approve every single ad that goes live on the site. So there is a team of people that manually check through, obviously our auctions, but also our kind of our standard classified ads that go on online. They are checking through for previous signs of fraud against email addresses and phone numbers, and literally checking that the descriptions of vehicles are well written and that people aren't trying to be fraudulent around them. So we don't see it. We don't have kind of fraudulent complaints from advertisers or inquirers on our business, because we're protecting phone numbers, we're making sure that text scams don't happen on the site, those kind of things. So we're really keen. I think that's why Car and Classic is such a trusted brand, to make sure that it's a safe place to transact, and it's a site for enthusiasts that's only got enthusiasts on it. There shouldn't be any fraud on there.
Yeah. I mean, it's the old adage, isn't it? I mean, if you see a car listed in various places and it's way cheaper than you expect it to be, there's probably something a little bit fishy about it, isn't there? Whereas with the likes of Car and Classic and other classified car websites, there's a contact number. You can pick up the phone to the dealer. You can ask them to send some more photos. There is that contact, isn't there? And it just makes that whole process a lot more simple and transparent.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's another area where the Cazana link really helps. We spot that for sure people try to list fraudulent ads on the site, and we're looking for that stuff all the time. And if we see a vehicle that's listed significantly out of its price cohort, so someone is selling something that should be worth 30 grand for 15, we'll flag that as potential fraud and then look into it before we allow that listing to go live.
Yeah. We just got a couple of questions about the auction side of the business, Tom. Johnny says, what is the cost for using the auction site versus advertising on the site? I mean, is there a cost difference here, or is it purely just a different type of business model?
It's a totally different type of business model. So with an auction, Car and Classic takes a 5% plus VAT commission on the sale. So that includes us listing it online, photography, putting the listing together, and then obviously getting that through to the hammer price, and then includes the escrow service as well around the safe transaction on that vehicle. Car and Classic classified ads are free to list. So anyone can go online and put a classified ad for free on Car and Classic. They always have been free, they always will be. There are dealer packages that enable dealers to get kind of more out of the site, so increase the visibility of their stock, get additional features out of the stock. But from a classified point of view, the Car and Classic is free to list.
Yeah. Are there any particular cars you've got on the auction side of the business at the moment which you're particularly excited about, or is there always a wide selection of stuff which you're always itching to actually put your own money down on?
It's an occupational hazard running this site, because you browse the site too much. I'm biased because I've got a Rover P5B
wow.
It's one of my classics, and there's a beautiful P6 on the site at the moment, which is an original car, never restored, very low mileage. That goes live next week on the auction. And we were chatting earlier about the DS4 obviously launched today, and there's a beautiful original DS, 1972 car on the site as well at the moment on the auction. So yeah, worth a browse. Some beautiful stuff on there at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you do want the real thing, then check out that DS, which I will be checking out after this show. Now, let's just talk about the classic car market. I know you said that it's been relatively strong. It's going to continue. I mean, have you seen sort of any trends that have been sort of new trends coming through in the last 12 months, or is it generally the same kind of cars that are proving to be popular?
So I mean, our best performers at the moment, auction and classified wise, are 90s German cars. So your Porsches and your Mercs and your BMWs from the 90s, and we see this. There is this there's this trend of the bedroom wall effect, I call it. So the cars people had on their bedroom wall and aspired to, when those people kind of grow up and they come into some disposable income, obviously there's a price driver, there's an increase that happens around those kind of vehicles. So yeah, the German 90 stuff is probably the strongest performing at the moment. We have seen some stuff kind of slightly come off the boil, and interestingly some modern classics amongst that. So MX-5s have come off a little bit off the boil, the kind of the Mark 1s this year. And Vauxhall Cavaliers were one of the faller in the list of data I was given before this, so I'm not sure why, but stuff that maybe got a bit hyped as modern classics and then have kind of come off the boil slightly. But yeah, the VW Corrado is one of the best performers over the last year, so that kind of coming into modern classicville now probably, and being appreciated by more people out there in the market and driving the price up. And then you've got your kind of your steady performers, I guess, like the Ford Cortina, which we saw a great rise in last year. I think that's partially driven by kind of race series and the number of people that are race prepping those cars, and the number of series that they're applicable for. But that another really strong performer from a value point of view on the site.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it always makes me wonder how things, events like Goodwood and Good Revival, they really must have a massive effect on cars of the 50s and the 60s, because there's such a wide selection of cars in that era for different price points, and events like that, they really must have an effect on those types of cars.
Yeah, eligibility is a big thing, and we'll see that described a lot in the ads. Which trophy at Goodwood is eligible for, obviously what kind of papers it's got, and so on. And so we have a section on the site for FIA papered race cars in particular. So you can go and browse. If you fancy yourself at hopefully what is this year's revival, if it happens later this year, then yeah, you can go and buy a car kind of specifically papered and appropriate for that.
Yeah. I mean, and even not necessarily race cars, but it's just normal cars. That era is sort of it's old enough to be different, but they're not that difficult to drive, are they? Whereas cars, pre-war cars, you do have to be a bit more of an enthusiast to actually own them. So that there must be some sort of market dynamics between cars purely for enthusiasts, and also people just buy an MGB because their dad had one, or they just want to have that look at events like Goodwood, don't they?
Yeah, look, I think you're absolutely right. There's a cut-off, isn't there, in kind of ease of drivability that happens somewhere probably around 1940 or 50. You've got your early cars, which will always kind of almost perform like art, right? The Bentley blowers and so on. They are limited number cars and will always perform reasonably well from a price point of view. But yeah, I think it's probably what we're seeing around the 90s cars, right? They're all eminently usable and drivable as a daily driver. I would argue even a 1972 P5B is, but again, I'm biased. But you've got that era of cars where they brake well, they can keep up with modern traffic, and it is very much usable, and you don't pay tax, and your insurance is relatively cheap. So yeah, I mean, I think classics will remain attractive for quite a long period of time for people that want something a little bit different, and can use them as a daily driver if they want to, as well as something fun for the weekend.
Yeah, and there is an argument to be said that the classic car market has actually got quite a good future, really, because yes, we are moving towards an electrified future, and we don't know the supply of petrol and whether it's going to become an easy commodity. But as modern cars start to lose their character, I would put money on it that people will start to invest more in the classic car scene, because they're more passionate. They mean something to just the rather boring A to B electric car, which we're all going to be having outside our houses.
You can, I mean, yeah, there's an electrification piece happening in classic car land as well. So a wide range of different views on that, and I won't express an opinion today. But you can do that if you want to switch the engine out of your MGB or whatever. You can have that done now, or your Mini. But look, I think there will be and it's an important part of most countries' heritage, right? Is the automotive history and the vehicles that they saw on the road and they had as kids, or their parents had as kids. And I think it's here to that passionate enthusiast audience around it for a long period to come, and we look forward to welcoming them on Car and Classic.
Yeah. And do I take it from that you're not likely to be switching your the V8 out of the P5B for an electric motor? Is that
I've thoroughly considered the carbon cost of doing so, and I think the sunk cost of making that vehicle, based on the number of miles I do per annum, which is not very much in that, suggests that it's better off leaving it as is.
Well, I don't blame you. I do not blame you. Tom, lovely to have you on. We're going to have to leave it there for today, I'm afraid. But great to hear what's going on with the business, and we'll have to get you back on again in a few months' time. But for today, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, James. Cheers.
So that's it for today's Car Dealer Live. If you'd like to be involved in the show, then please do email me, james.batchelor@blackballmedia.co.uk. But for today, thanks very much for watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.